Welcome to Old Fashioned Finance, the podcast that mixes cocktails and high finance. I'm your host, Caleb Frankert, and I'm joined today by my good friend and fellow money muddler, Jason Burnell.
Caleb, can a podcast about finance be entertaining?
Not without alcohol.
All right, let's mix it up. Woo!
All right, we are going to mix it up.
We are, yeah.
Let's mix it up.
But we did mix it up.
Let's give a podcast.
Give the podcast.
Yes, it's time to give the podcast. All right, folks.
Settle in, folks.
We're back. This is part 2 of our newest small business, small batch series. We've got a new small batch for you. We've got a new small business topic. Well, this is part 2. We did starting a small business last time around. Today, we're going to talk about running a small business. Let's talk about what we're drinking. But before we do, I guess, I should go back because after listening to a little bit of the episode from last week, I realized we talked about Elijah Craig small batch and barely talked about Elijah Craig small batch. I realized that
we were focused on the drinking part.
Well, I'm so used to that bourbon. I'm very familiar with it. I feel like I could point that one out in a lineup. You know, like when you do blinds and stuff, I feel like that's the one that I can always pull out of a lineup. But I realize not everybody's as familiar, so
sure.
It's great. We'll go back and say that it's great. It's affordable.
We confirmed that last time.
Makes a heck of an old fashioned. But as far as, you know, aromas and tastes and all that kind of stuff, I guess we didn't really pull that out of there. So according to their website,
yeah, that'll work.
It's delightfully complex. Vanilla bean, sweet fruit, and fresh mint. Did you get any of that?
I definitely get the vanilla flavor for sure.
Yeah, fresh mint is a little bit...
That's a new one for me.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I get that with their rye, but this is not a rye episode. The taste, so that was the aroma. The taste, smooth and warm. Pleasantly woody with accents of spice, smoke, and nutmeg. I'm on board with that.
Yeah, nutmeg.
And long finish, sweet and slightly toasty.
Yeah, and the finish on that is it's long and it's really it gets in your jowls, I suppose.
It makes your like Fred Minnick, who's a professional bourbon taster. My goodness, what a job! You know, he talks about a good bourbon and how it makes your whole mouth feel.
Yeah,
you know, you get that not sting, but you get that.
It's kind of like down in your gums.
Yeah,
yeah.
It gives you all the feels, all the bourbon feels. So.
Right.
I realized we didn't give Elijah Craig enough
we shorted it. Not enough due time because it's good.
This one will be a little easier to talk about today because you and I have both never had this.
Right.
So what we're drinking today, Jason, is Michter's small batch.
So many consonants in there, you know.
Yes, Michter's. I'm not sure what's the origin of that.
I have no idea.
So Michter's US one. It's a small batch. I'm going to read the back of the bottle here. We are proud to offer you our small batch bourbon in the Michter's tradition, hailing from one of America's first whiskey distilleries. Oh, so it's been around.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Don't they all say that?
Kinda.
This bourbon is made from highest quality American corn. Well, that's good to know. And matured to the peak of perfection in hand-selected charred white oak barrels. It is then further mellowed by our signature filtration.
Interesting.
Yeah. Michter's, I'm used to their rye. That's if
super common.
Yeah, if you've tried Michter's, it's probably been their rye. But yeah, first time I've seen I've seen it a few times.
I mean, it says like 1753. Like, when did Kentucky become a state? Do we know this? Like
1792 is named after Kentucky statehood.
So
remember?
So they must have been doing this like in the backwoods.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, there's been bourbon in Kentucky way before Kentucky was a state.
You know what? Early on in the podcast, we would mix up cocktails and talk about controversy. And if they're claiming earlier than 1789, that's when Elijah Craig says that they invented bourbon, folks.
Ooh.
So,
we're gonna have a holy war here.
Why don't we we'll let these two punch each other out here?
All right, here we go. That's super smooth.
Yeah,
we didn't pregame this at all. We
No.
just this is our first drink.
That's the first I've ever had it. It's the first you've ever had it. There are some similarities there with Elijah Craig.
Yeah, there's a lot of vanilla. Yeah, it's excellent. That's
there's
really good.
A good sweetness to it. The vanilla, yeah.
Yeah, so if you like a sweeter bourbon, this is definitely... Now, we're not talking like... This isn't lemonade, folks, but...
No.
It's good.
You know, I was going to say one thing that this has that the Elijah Craig doesn't necessarily... I feel like this tastes like it's a little proofier, a little hotter, but in a good way. It's warm and smooth. It's really smooth.
I mean, it's still finishing for me, so that's awesome.
And as Fred says, I guess we'll just talk about Fred Minnick today. No, he says the finish is what wins bourbon contests for him. So still finishing. That's a really good bourbon. And on the affordability scale, it's a little bit
It's in
pricier
the
than
middle of
Elijah
the road.
Craig.
Yeah.
It's probably about $10 more on average, I'd say.
Yeah, but it would be worth having it on the shelf next to something like that.
I think so, and it is a really cool bottle. It's got an old-fashioned copper still on there.
Sure.
Got an old school looking, almost like a...
It's kind of Americana looking, though.
Yeah.
Like...
It's got the stars.
This would have been in George Washington's, cabinet.
There's a little bit of a piratey feel to it, too. I don't know why.
Yeah. No, it's man, the finish is phenomenal on that.
Let's see how good your taste is, Jason. What did you pull out of this one?
Vanilla, and I would put nutmeg in there again. A little bit of burnt oaky feel on the initial taste. I don't have a great sense of smell, so I didn't smell other...
That's usually good.
Yeah. But a phenomenal long finish. I mean, it was 60 seconds minimum. It was probably more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of coated your mouth, which is great. I mean, that's what you want in a good bourbon.
Usually something you get with the higher proof stuff. So, your palate is becoming more refined, Jason.
Ooh, I've been practicing.
I like to taste something and then look and see what you're supposed to be tasting.
Yeah, well, I just exposed myself.
So what we're supposed to taste is rich caramel, vanilla, smokiness and oakiness, smoky and oaky. I got both of those in there for sure. One thing I just went back for a second sip, and I still am not totally picking up on this, stone fruit.
No, not even.
No?
No. I mean, it's sweeter, so it does make sense.
When I hear stone fruit, I think of sucking on a peach pit.
Right. Something like that. And that's pretty
totally
sweet.
Getting it, but that's really good.
Yeah.
That's really good. I think that belongs in the regular rotation, my friend.
It does, but we think every bourbon almost does.
There's not a whole lot that I've met that I didn't
We
like.
definitely have a few. We're like, what was that?
Yeah. All right, so the question is, in this series, we're sticking with old fashions. So how do these small batches hold up in an old fashioned, Jason? Well, guess what we have ready to go?
Old fashions.
Ooh, that's good.
There's no bite to that at all.
That's good. So
we mixed it up a little bit different this time, though.
We did a little bit. If you're listening at home, we did it one way last week. These are basically the same ingredients, but we went with 2 ounces of bourbon, in this case Michter's. Instead of simple syrup, we found sugar cubes. So we put our bitters in there to kind of wet the sugar cube, a little tiny bit of water, and we muddled that into the glass. So 2 ounces of bourbon, a sugar cube, a little bit of water, 2 dashes of bitters, garnished with an orange peel and a Luxardo cherry. And we do have some different bitters here today too, don't we?
Yeah, so we use these Watkins bitters, which is a common vanilla manufacturer.
Yeah, vanilla extract.
Yeah.
In the baking aisle, right?
In the baking aisle. And so we were curious by this bottle. It's black. And
our good friend AB at the local beverage center said, hey, you guys got to try this.
Yeah, you got to try it. And I mean, it definitely has that rich, warm kind of taste to it. It's cool. The back of the bottle has an old-fashioned recipe on it, which is basically what we just did.
Oh, I didn't even see that. Did we do it right?
Well, we should try again just to I'm just kidding. These bitters, that's a whole nother world that we've not really gone down. There's tons of different kinds of bitters. But
we could do just old fashions all the time and just play with bitters, quite honestly.
There's a pretty significant taste to this that's different. I would say I would call this more like pumpkin pie spice taste.
Yeah, it definitely tastes more like baking ingredients than your typical Angostura bitters.
Yep, little bit of cherry in there. I don't know. It's just good, but that could be the cherry.
I looked into the process of making bitters, and it's kind of a whole new world out there. But making your own bitters is something that a lot of folks do now. It's in vogue. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of good bitters out there. That'd be like saying, I don't have enough good bourbon to drink, so I'm going to make my own. Hey, but I like this. This is pretty good stuff.
Again, are we starting a whole nother rotation of things? We did a sugar cube.
We have the basics of a great drink here.
Right.
So if you're listening at home and you don't have all these exact ingredients, you can plug and play a little bit with an old-fashioned recipe, and you're going to be just fine. The key is good bourbon, and it plays well with others.
It makes a huge difference, no doubt. Yeah, they like to play together, that's for sure.
So cool. That's good. I like that a lot. And yeah, Watkins Bitters. Check that out. They're not expensive. I think pretty easy to find, actually.
I think it was like $5 for that bottle, so not bad.
We'll take it. Okay, what do you think? Should we move on to the finance topic, Jason?
Yeah, I'm going to end up drinking this too fast if we don't. So
we're in the Small Business Small Batch, episode 2. of this
Episode
current
2.
series. We're going to talk about running a business today, Jason. So you've got some experience running a business. Something that I felt like when we were preparing for these episodes, this could have gone in the last episode also.
Sure.
But it's kind of a rabbit hole that we could have gone down and, turn this into an hour and a half podcast pretty quick, which we don't want to do.
Yeah, all you need to know to run a business in an hour and a half.
Yeah. So if you're listening and taking notes at home, remember this is the Cliff Notes version.
Right.
This is some pointers and things to help you out. It's not running a business for dummies, and a lot of this is just tapping into knowledge and experience. And, hopefully you glean something from it. Let's talk about that today. The first thing, Jason, that I want to kind of jump into, again, that kind of bridges the gap between last week's episode and this week's episode is organization or the structure of your business.
Sure.
So let's
kind of the boring stuff.
Yeah.
After you got your idea all kind of squared away, it's like, let's do this now.
So you've decided to start a business. Now you get to decide how to structure your business. And when I say structure, I'm thinking things like sole proprietor or partnership or LLC, which can cover both of those too. But talk a little bit, Jason, about the determining factors for how you should structure your business.
Yeah. So like my first thought on this point is I think a lot of folks, again, you have a great idea. You've tested your market. We talked all about that last time. You're like, let's do this. And they go out and they want to like skip over this part. Mm-hmm. You need to seek good counsel on this, someone that's either done it or does it for a living. But, there's a lot of determining factors. Like a sole prop, if this is almost like a hobby that may become a business and it's just you, go for it, man. Mm-hmm. Like that's going to be probably the easiest way. The legal work that you have to do is super minimum, probably won't cost you anything. But again, it just comes down to, is there a liability involved or not? Yeah. If you're like doing a sole prop, but it's like chimney cleaning and, you put the brush down the chimney and it just like makes the whole fireplace fall in, that would be a liability.
And there's liability in about anything that you're going to do for a business, even when you're dealing in the I say intellectual space, but we don't sell a thing here.
Right.
We don't have a product. We don't perform physical work on a property or anything like that, but there's liability in our business too. So sure. If you're in finance or you're in the intellectual property business.
Yeah. So it may not be like physical property damage that you need to think about, but if you're dealing with somebody's testament of their life's work, like we do, there's going to be liability. So you got to think about that. And that's where, the LLC kind of comes in. A limited liability corporation is a nice shelter for a small business owner to help, I guess, bridge or protect you from potential liabilities. Not that you're trying to like run away from them.
Sure.
But you don't want to have a grievance against your business that comes back and hurts you personally necessarily, unless there is like personal damages. But
so this may sound obvious to some people who are listening, but maybe not to others. So reasons for, let's say, looking into a limited liability company or something would be if we'll use your chimney sweeping example, right? Chimney caves in and, now you've got thousands of dollars worth of damage.
Right.
How does your client come in and get you for that? How are they made whole if there's no LLC involved?
Yeah. So, they would just come after you probably almost certainly with personally. Mm-hmm. They're going to sue your business, which is you.
Right.
And that's the real fear.
There's no buffer or level of protection.
Right. And so LLCs are great ways to structure membership. All that means is who's involved. Mm-hmm. Do they have ownership or not? And, I think generally speaking, I would almost always recommend an LLC, even for someone that's doing a sole prop that might be going just a bit further than a hobby. And even if it is a hobby.
I'll use an example here. Very, very recently, I met with a client of ours she's been a nurse for 20 some years. As you know, the healthcare field is a grind, a bit of a grind right now. There's a lot going on. Like many businesses or industries, those folks are stretched thin and they're doing hard work. But the medical field, especially with the pandemic stuff. So her thought was and she's probably 5 years out from retirement.
Sure.
Her thought was, maybe I get out of the grind, and she does take care of somebody and does some in-home health care kind of on the side. And she thought, well, people have asked me about this before. What if I just want to do this on my own and have 5 or 6 people that I take care of on the side? I like where she's going with that.
Yeah.
I do, but some things to consider. And I don't like to be the wet blanket in these conversations and say, okay.
Unfortunately, that's a big part of our job.
It is. And it's for her, it was a good analogy when I can say, okay, now here's where I've got to be the doctor, if you will, right? I need to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. So run with this idea. I think it's great. I think it could work. You need to think about personal liability and insurance and different things like that. And a lot of that plays into the structure. At the end of the day, is she going to do it? I don't know that she wants to get involved in all that this close to retirement, but these are things that you need to consider that are often an afterthought or on the back burner, and they need to be on the front.
Sure.
So
yeah. And I mean, I think that a lot of times, again, people get blinded by the excitement of wanting to start, and then they forget this stuff. So
yeah, so that's a little bit of housekeeping. It kind of bridges the gap between the two episodes. Real quick, to find out more about this, what would you recommend? Who should someone talk to if they're thinking about ways to structure their business or start an LLC or something of that nature?
So I mean, a good attorney is where I would go. Someone that you have a relationship with. You're not going to go and you may not have a relationship with, but they typically will specialize in some kind of business entity, structure, or management of businesses. They all kind of have specialties, just like we kind of do too.
Yeah.
So sit down and just have a conversation. It'll be, $500 or less, really good money spent. Everyone assumes everything's going to go right. And attorneys,
it almost never does.
It almost never goes right. Yeah. So, it's just important to have all that structure in place properly. Again, that work is super important.
So attorneys, also, I know there are some accountants or CPAs that work in this area too.
Sure.
So there's a lot of resources out there. Definitely get some professional counsel. Okay, Jason, let's move on to I think this will be fun to talk about.
This is better. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, we threw a wet blanket on our conversation.
Let's get that out of the way. The old fashions are starting to kick in. Let's have a little bit of fun. We're going to talk about running the business, specifically managing the business. And I put on here creating a culture, right?
Yep.
So let's talk about that a little bit. You're starting out. You're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to rock and roll. You got the LLC, the organization stuff figured out. How do you go about attracting folks to your business if you're going to employ folks? How do you go about creating a great climate, a great culture at your business, Jason?
Right. So first thing there is, it's intentional. Okay. You might be real charming and be, an extra special person. It's not enough. So charming is good, but you got to be intentional about what you want. And I think the best question any small business owner can ask is what would I want?
Yeah.
If I were an employee here or a client or a customer, what would I want it to be like? Do I want it to be super professional and stiff? And obviously, I don't like this option. But
or do you want to be able to talk about poop?
Yeah, exactly.
And all the stupid things we do here.
You might guess our culture.
what if you like telling fart jokes? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is like in our work, what we do is super serious.
Yeah,
and we have to make it light.
We have to add some levity.
Yeah,
for sure.
and I think we've all come from, you personally, when you start a business, you have some history of, you're probably a practitioner somewhere else, or you have an idea of what they look like. So
something caused you to start a business. You probably worked in your field before starting that business. And chances are, the reason you're a business owner is you thought, if I was running the show, I would do things differently.
You would do ... Yeah. And then you get hit by the proverbial bus.
Well, I think something you said at the beginning was really insightful when you said, you might be really charming, right? You might be very persuasive up front. And, I'm thinking a lot of people who start their own businesses were salespeople, right? Who can turn it on in front of a client, right? And they can wow and they can impress. But if you're running a business and you're hiring people, I'm going to put it bluntly, they see you naked.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they see you in good times and in bad times.
Man, Caleb. I mean, you could have just told me.
I'm not saying that Jason
outside of this podcast,
he doesn't walk around the office naked. But what I'm getting at
that's a good thing.
Is these people see you in good times and in bad times.
Sure do.
Business comes with great days and some really bad days too, and your employees see that. So It's, I think, about more than just being able to be on all the time. It's about creating a culture that can get through the ups and downs, right?
Yeah, I would argue that it's almost impossible to be on all the time. Like, it just is so difficult. So you are going to be exposed. And so you better be certain that you can manage your personality, and the people you're going to be working with know that you're not always on. Okay. And so, our culture, I've always focused on is trying to be as close to a family culture as possible, open and honest communication. And I think that goes a long way.
Sometimes that means we close the door and yell it out.
Yeah, it's been done. Yeah. So, but at the end of the day, we feel like we can, figure out a resolution and move forward. And that's like one of the best lessons, I guess, I learned early on. Because if you focus on all the things you want to be pissed about all the time, yikes. You will be mad all the time. Because, again, we're dealing with humans. They don't always do what you want. And quite frankly, they probably have a better perspective than you do as the business owner in a lot of cases. So that culture and that open communication is it's priceless.
So this sounds like a goal to me, right? This is what you want your culture to look like. This is what you want to be able to happen. This is how you want your business to be able to exist in good times and in bad. This sounds a lot like marriage vows.
Well, but it kind of is. Even if it's just you're making a promise to yourself of like what you want it to look like.
But this sounds like the end game. This is what we're after. So, Jason, talk a little bit about how we get to that point where your business can handle the ups and downs and the turmoil that will happen as a business owner.
So I think like right out of the gate, what I would point to is like making sure you have a plan. I said system because that's what I think in my head. It's more than a process, it's a system. How do I nurture the people that are involved? Okay, that means once a week, I'm going to sit down and have an hour-long conversation with them about whatever they want, and they lead it. Great, let's do that. I'm going to make sure they know what their job is.
That's important.
Like, what's the expectation?
And it sounds obvious, Jason.
But
it sounds
not
obvious, right?
Like, someone's got to clean the toilet, okay? Like, I remember getting super ticked off about the coffee area being messy.
Yeah.
And I realized, like, I never told anybody it was their responsibility. And
taking out the trash.
Yeah.
Doing the dishes.
That's right. Like, really. Like, actually
doing the dishes. Yeah.
So, like, these are things that someone has to do in the business. And that's just the reality. And the more you're passive aggressive about it, it's just going to eat you up.
Yeah.
So nurturing those relationships, making sure people know what their jobs are, and not necessarily, you don't have to be apologetic about it. Somebody has to be responsible. Okay. And when things fall outside of their job responsibility, you better communicate what you want done.
Yeah.
Okay. That's hard. I'm really bad at it. This is counseling now.
I was going to say, this sounds very therapeutic, doesn't it? But I think that, the thing that I'll add to that too, you mentioned like having an hour where you talk about whatever you want to talk about, what's on your mind. And I feel like that's a moment for an employee to be vulnerable with you. But as a business owner too, you've got to be vulnerable with your employees.
That's right.
One thing we talked about earlier was you got to be able to not just work with these folks on a 40-hour a week basis, right? It's probably better if you enjoy being with these folks for 40 hours.
We actually wrote it on our notes. It's like to spend time together.
Yeah.
And I would say that's pretty important. I think everyone knows someone that goes to work and like almost checks the box and then comes home, and
which is not good for anybody involved, especially if you're running a small business. One bad attitude goes a lot further, right? We don't have 500 employees here.
For sure. And you got to remember your constituents here. Like, who are you here to serve? And, we're here to serve people in their like big financial decisions. We better keep that in focus all the time and not, want to go throw a hissy fit because someone didn't clean up the coffee area.
Right.
It's silly. But
you might be mad at somebody for a week and they have no idea why you're mad, and that's not good for anybody.
No, and I mean, this is in marriages and in business. Right. And, like we said, in many ways, that culture that you cultivate is like a family. So I think it's important to spend time on it, develop it, and be super intentional. You better have a plan because running a business is hard.
I think something I'll add to this, Jason, is that when you're intentional about building a culture here for employees, remember, this is small business, small batch. We're talking about a small business. When you start, you're not going to have 50 employees or 100 employees. You're probably starting with 1 or 2, maybe, if you're starting with any. And that culture that you build, it translates into your client experience too. I say it all the time. Clients come in here and they feel like they're part of the family.
Right.
So the culture that you breed with your employees branches out into other areas of the business. One last thing I think that would be good to talk about is, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, is when you come to work 40 hours a week for a small business owner, those folks are investing time here in your business. How do you invest back in your employees? Why is that important in your opinion? I'm talking about, finding, nurturing, and retaining talent.
Yeah, so I think that's a super important point here. I think it, again, like many things in a small business, and you're going to hear me say this probably again next time, is it has to be a system. It has to be a process that you follow. And early on, everything feels like chaos. So how are you going to make this person serve the business better? And so in our practice is, how can I make Caleb a better advisor? Is it education? Is it take a dog on vacation? What does that mean? So benefits, having flexibility. And I think that development piece is where I'm going to point to most. I feel like here we've dedicated a lot of energy to development, whether it's becoming a CFP or an EA or whatever it is. We want everyone here to feel like they have an avenue to grow into what they want their life to be like. And hopefully it serves us. I mean, you got to be smart about I'm not going to, like, Caleb wants to learn underwater basket weaving. Like, I'm not going to send him to do that as much. He can take a vacation, do whatever he wants. But if he wants to be, a corporate auditor for whatever reason, it might be something that has a connection. So, you just want to support that. And that comes in those conversations. Yeah. I think you would agree with that it makes an employee feel like they have not just a say, but they're in charge of their career path. Yeah,
I think going back to the investment, when you're investing in your people, they understand that. They should feel like their development is one of your goals in all of this. And I think when people feel like you're investing in them as well, they're going to turn around and invest more into the company. So it's good for everybody.
And I said, like, examples that are kind of pricey. Like,
sure.
You don't necessarily, send them to like Fred Pryor Excel's class for like one day.
Yeah, like one day I'd like to learn the computer.
Yeah. and that new phone.
Yeah.
He just upgraded from the flip phone. It's time to learn the Instagram and the Facebook.
No, I don't think I'm going to do that. That's huge, though. I think that investment, it's harder for someone to leave when you feel like you're someone is investing and spending time on your development, and it's a place where you can grow. So yeah, it goes back to something I said to clients early on. Not really clients, but actually coworkers back in my days at the bank. You remember the bank days?
Oh, yes.
And people would ask, well, how do you handle client situation X? How do you get to build relationships? And I can be a bit of a sarcastic guy, Jason. You've heard me say this, I know. I said, I think people feel comfortable with me because they feel like I care about them. And, my coworkers would ask, well, how do you get them to feel that way? And I said, novel idea. I care about them. People can tell when you care.
Sure.
So I think the same thing works with employees.
And it's exciting when you start to feel like a client will repeat that back to you, even when you didn't tell them.
Yeah.
Where they say, like, I know that you are serving us the best way that you can. And that is like, that's like, I feel like I'm like at Cracker Barrel and I have 5 badges on, like stars on my chest because I'm like the number one employee. When people say that to me. So it's I don't know how we did it. Like, there's not a formula, but it's intentional.
Right.
Okay. And you got to follow your instinct, seek good counsel on, like a mentor to help you do this. If you know someone that has a really awesome business and a great culture, talk to them. What did they do? What mistakes did they make? They probably made buckets of them.
Yeah, you probably...
We can have an episode on that if you want.
I was going to say, you probably frequent a local business that you like because the energy is there, or you can feel the culture when you walk in. Talk to those folks.
Right.
See how you can duplicate that. Jason, this was a little bit more of a feely episode.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm starting to feel this old-fashioned.
So a couple of reactions. I think, one reaction. The sugar cube in the old-fashioned, better in my opinion.
I'm definitely for it. I don't like the simple syrup nearly as much.
All right, folks. Well, thanks for having a drink with us this week. It's time to close out the tab. If you have a question or a topic you want addressed on the Old Fashioned Finance podcast, be sure to email us at speakeasy@oldfashionedfinance.com. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to share the show with someone you love or just someone who needs a little money muddling themselves. You can stay up to date with all of the latest action by following us on Facebook and Instagram. Old Fashioned Finance is brought to you by Blue Jay Financial Group. That's bluejayfg.com and produced by Podastery Studios. We've been your hosts, Caleb and Jason. Cheers.
Yeah.
Blue Jay Financial Group, LLC, Blue Jay, is a registered investment advisor registered with the state of Ohio. Registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training. The presence of this advertisement on this podcast shall not be directly or indirectly interpreted as a solicitation of investment advisory services to persons of another jurisdiction, unless otherwise permitted by statute. Follow-up or individualized responses to consumers in a particular state by Blue Jay in the rendering of personalized investment advice for compensation shall not be made without first complying with jurisdiction requirements or pursuant to an applicable state exemption. All verbal and written content on this presentation is for information purposes only. Opinions expressed herein are solely those of Blue Jay, unless otherwise specifically cited. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations are made by our firm as to other parties' informational accuracy or completeness. All information or ideas provided should be discussed in detail with an advisor, accountant, or legal counsel prior to implementation.